All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to break down a really cool science-backed technique that can help you explain pretty much any complex idea and make it feel totally intuitive. The secret? It's all about mirroring the exact way our brains are already wired to learn.
So, have you ever been in this situation? You're listening to someone who is clearly a genius, right? They're an expert in their field. But the more they talk, the more you feel your brain just drifting away. Instead of that aha moment, you just end up feeling kind of lost. And honestly, a little dumb.
Well, if that sounds familiar, I want you to know you're not alone. It's not your fault. This is a huge, super common breakdown in communication. It happens when there's this big gap between how a subject is being taught and how our brains are actually built to get it. So how do we fix this gap? Well, it all starts with understanding one simple, fundamental thing about how our brains work. And you might be surprised to hear this, but it all comes down to a process that feels a lot like guessing. Now, this guessing has a scientific name: inference. It's the constant, nonstop process of drawing conclusions based on the evidence and reasoning around you. Seriously, your brain is doing this all day, every single day. It's like a powerful inference machine, always trying to connect the dots and figure out what's going on. And our brains pretty much have two main ways of doing this. First, there's inductive inference. This is where we see an effect, and we work backward to try and guess the cause. You're basically looking for a pattern to build a theory. Then there's deductive inference, which is the complete opposite. You start with a general rule, the cause, and you predict the effect. Let's make this super, super simple. Okay, imagine you wake up, you look out your window, and you see that the ground is all wet. That's your observation. That's the effect. What does your brain do instantly, without you even thinking about it? It makes a leap. It scans its memory for patterns and concludes, it probably rained last night. See? You went from the effect, the wet ground, back to the likely cause, the rain. That's classic inductive inference right there. Okay, now let's flip that scenario around. Imagine you're inside. You look out the window, and you see it's just starting to rain. You know the cause. Your brain immediately predicts the outcome. Well, the ground is about to get wet. You went from cause to effect. That's deductive inference. Now, this is the really important part. Our brains use both methods. But the journey of discovery, of actually learning something new for the first time, almost always starts with that inductive guess. And that is where we run into the biggest problem in communication. There's this massive gap between how we discover knowledge for ourselves and how we usually try to teach it to other people. Just think about it. Experts spend years, maybe decades, on this long inductive journey. They're gathering clues, making observations, spotting patterns, all to arrive at their big conclusion. But then, when it's time to explain it, they forget all about that journey. They just jump straight to the answer. The perfect example is Isaac Newton. He didn't just wake up one day with the formula for gravity in his head. Nope. His journey started with a simple observation: an apple falling from a tree. He asked why, and that question started this whole inductive process of looking for patterns, which eventually led him to the theory of gravity. But how do we learn it in school? We're just given the final formula first. We're taught deductively, and we totally miss out on that whole thrill of discovery. So when an expert jumps right to their final point, it puts the audience in a really awkward position. You're left with basically two choices. One, you can just decide to believe them based on faith, because they're the expert. Or two, you can just tune out, ignore the message because it doesn't actually connect to anything you already know. And neither of those options leads to real understanding. So how do we fix this? How do we actually bridge this gap? Well, it all comes down to a simple 3-step technique that basically hacks this natural learning process. Okay, here we go. It's just 3 steps. First, start shared. You have to begin with an experience that everybody in the room can recognize: a story, a problem, something relatable. Second, build together. You guide them through the evidence. You let them connect the dots and guess the pattern for themselves. And finally, only after they've had that aha moment do you move to step 3. Name it. Now you can introduce the official name or the theory. And this right here is where the magic happens. Because at this point, the theory isn't some weird abstract idea that you're just throwing at them. It's just the name for a pattern they've already figured out on their own. It just clicks.
It feels totally intuitive because, in a way, they helped you create that understanding.
So really, the big shift here is a simple one. It's about changing your starting point. You don't start with the answer. You start with the question that got you to the answer in the first place. At the end of the day, people aren't really persuaded by a pile of facts and data. They're persuaded by a pattern they can see and connect with their own lives. So your job as a storyteller isn't just to dump information. It's to help your audience discover that relatable pattern. So the real goal here is to stop telling people things and start guiding them. Frame your whole idea like a mystery that you can all solve together. Take your audience on the exact same journey of discovery that you went on, because when they arrive at the conclusion with you, they don't just understand it, they own it. So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you have to explain a big idea or a really important project, think about it. Are you going to start with your final answer, or are you going to start with that shared experience, that little bit of curiosity that gets everybody on the same journey with you right from the very start?